my family didn't condition gender a lot. And I would say I kind of missed a bit the boxes for gender, because like honestly, if a cis person doesn't explain to me how they experience their gender,
Yeah.
I don't understand what they talk about.
So it's a very kind of confusing topic
Y-
on probably both sides as well, right? Because people who are,
Yes.
I guess, born a woman or a man don't necessarily understand someone who who is born into that body, but doesn't necessarily relate to as you said, the gender norms that society has put down as to this is what you are if you're in this category.
Yes, yes. Like I don't have an inner concept of it. So I've learned about it. I've learned in conversations with many different people with different genders
Mm.
to understand my own. But for me, it's really a rational kind of learning. It's not an inner felt sense.
Welcome to the Queer Quest podcast, your beacon of light and sprinkle of glitter in the queer community. I'm your host, Cristiano Green, CEO and founder of Queer Quest and a transformation coach for queer individuals. And together, we're embarking on a journey of transformation. Each week, we bring you a new training topic or connecting with visionary queer leaders in healing and coaching, diving deep into conversations that inspire growth, celebrate diversity, and empower you to live authentically. So wherever you are, settle in and let's get ready to unlock the vibrant potential within. This is where your quest begins. Hello, all you fabulous souls, and welcome to another episode of the Queer Quest podcast. I'm your host, Cristiano Green, the CEO and founder of Queer Quest and a transformation coach for the queer community. And today I'm really excited to have on a very special guest today, Natalie Jovanic. I hope I've said that correctly. I know we have the English version and we have the Croatian German version of how it's pronounced as well. And Natalie is a trauma recovery coach, and she's also part of the non-binary community and the demisexual community. And we're looking forward today to have a deep discussion so that maybe we can share amazing parts of Natalie's story. So welcome to the podcast, Natalie.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to look forward for this conversation.
Me too. Now, I'd love to start because you've obviously got a journey of coming to terms and acceptance of who you are and your
Mhm,
binary journey, right? And your gender.
mhm.
I'd love to kind of get a bit of a backstory of, you growing up as a little one. When did you kind of come to terms with understanding that maybe you weren't, the gender that maybe you were born with and that shifted? So give us a bit of backstory on that.
Okay, so the backstory touches on my family dynamics. I need to say I grew up with childhood abuse, so my family dynamics wasn't healthy. However, I think the benefit part of my family was they never really imposed a gender onto me. And I'm not sure whether it's cultural, because I had conversations with people here in Canada that had far more obstacles. But like my mother allowed me to have short hair. My mother never really cared about what I was wearing. So, and they never really labeled me as a girl or woman, at least not in a way that I remember it.
Yeah.
And so I think I grew up in a very internalized world, very happy world. Personally, I would say, and I know there are language differences, but deep inside, like what resonates with me is the term it. Like I use they, them pronouns because I know here it is what we use in Canada. However, deep down, it feels to me gender a bit like it. And so I think most of my life, people didn't talk about gender. And so I just thought everyone was like me until I was like, when I was getting older, like people said, oh, as a woman, you are too much that, or as a woman, you're too much that. And I was sitting there and like, oh, what do you even mean? I don't know what it means. And I think even in my relationships, like I explain people how I experience gender without using the term non-binary, and people seem to be okay with that.
Gotcha.
So but when I heard these comments, and I know one was in a training for a personality test, and I positioned myself where I belonged, and she looked at me and she was like, oh my God, for a woman, you're much too much analytical. And I think she really shook me, because at this stage I wanted to find a new partner. And I thought, well, if I don't fit into anything, how can I ever find a partner? And I really started questioning, what does it mean to be a woman?
Yeah.
So I moved to Spain and I sat with this question and I found it very confusing. And so I didn't understand it. And I tried out all the different aspects, like the spiritual aspect with, I don't know, divine masculine, divine feminine. I've given up
Yes.
on that. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yes.
But then also the problem I had a bit, I had experienced sexual abuse as a child. So there was always the kind of doubt, well, what if I just don't feel like a woman because of the sexual abuse? And so
Yeah.
after a lot of healing around that, I just faced the truth and I said to me, no, like I'm healed and I still don't feel like it. Like I had a phase in my life where I was like, oh, I would love to be in the body of a man, just to have an understanding, how does it feel to have a male body? Because I wanted to find out what resonates.
I see.
And so the more I spoke with other trans folks and I understood kind of the difference, where am I and what it means to be a trans man and what it means to be a trans woman. Like these conversations really helped me to understand where are we maybe similar and where am I not fitting it. So on some degree, my relationship to my body is on a trans spectrum. However, I would be a horrible trans man and I'm not a cis woman. So I'm kind of somewhere in between. And like, I know that once in a classroom, a person kind of wanted to get the group better. So she put in men on this side and women on this side. And she said like gender is on a spectrum. And I knew exactly where on the line I needed to put myself.
Oh, yeah.
But then when I looked around me, like I was in the middle, like more on the male side, but also like, and I looked around me and I noticed I was the only one who was not in one of the corners. It was kind of weird. But like, yeah. So I think my journey was deep internally. I've always been this way, but then the kind of social conditioning that hit in kind of made me aware that something, I was different. Part of me was like, oh, there must be something wrong with me. But then over time, I really learned to be it. And I now feel like I've always been this way. And I know I've always been this way. I would say I didn't have the same pain as other non-binary folks have experienced in their childhood because my family didn't condition gender a lot. And I would say I kind of missed a bit the boxes for gender because like honestly, if a cis person doesn't explain to me how they experience their gender, I don't understand what they talk about.
So it's a very kind of confusing topic on probably both sides as well, right? Because people who are, I guess, born a woman or a man don't necessarily understand someone who is born into that body, but doesn't necessarily relate to the as you said, the gender norms that society has put down as to this is what you are if you're in this category.
Yes. Like I don't have an inner concept of it. So I've learned about it. I've learned in conversations with many different people with different genders to understand my own. But for me, it's really a rational kind of learning. It's not an inner felt sense.
I see. And so for people out there who maybe don't necessarily understand, like for you to say, I am non-binary, what would be the easiest way or best way that you can maybe describe non-binary and maybe your relation to it and you knowing that maybe that was the spectrum that you fit into best?
Okay. Yes. Okay. I think first of all, I need to say non-binary for me is, as you said, is a spectrum.
Yes.
Some people in the spectrum identify more on the trans spectrum and some people more on the cis spectrum. For me, I say I identify more on the trans spectrum because I'm not connected in this way to my body. I've learned to accept my body. I didn't do any surgery, but like, it is like my body parts kind of don't resonate fully with me. And I don't know, they're just body parts. And so for me, it is like, I don't fit into the boxes of man and woman. I also need to say for me, the inner felt sense of gender is different than my expression. I try to express more as a non-binary person, which doesn't work. So expression for me, I learned to just let it go because no matter how I express, it doesn't seem that other people fully understand how I experience gender. So for me, it's a very stable, as I like really, this is hard to like, a world without gender, like where you're just a person,
You're just a human
and
being, yeah, and it's not.
yes, and you wear whatever you want to wear, and it doesn't really matter. And so this is how I experience gender. Maybe it's not the perfect description.
No. And like I said, everyone's going to have a different understanding and expression of that for themselves. So it's totally fine. You mentioned before how you spoke to a lot of different people who were in the trans community. Was there a part of you on your journey who maybe thought that you were trans as well, or like where do you, and is that a common thing that you find for people in non-binary, that they kind of go through this kind of push and pull with their gender?
I think it is a discovery journey. I would say that I'm more on the trans spectrum, or that I am on the trans spectrum, just because, like, if I speak to trans men and trans women, it feels familiar. If I speak to cis people, it doesn't feel familiar. So it's more like what feels true in my body, and I can resonate with this. Body and gender doesn't align,
Mm.
and it doesn't, like, it just doesn't fit. And so, like, for me, it was really these conversations that helped me. I think there's still more, I would say, stigma associated with being trans
Of course.
than being non-binary cis. So there is more heaviness, and it took me a while to heal the heaviness. But honestly, like, I'm happy to be the way I am. And so how society views me, I can't change it, and I can just make the best out of my own journey. And so I'm happy on that.
Yeah, and and I'm glad to hear that you are happy. You've got to that place that you don't give a crap about how other people see you.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned earlier, or maybe it was when we've been speaking, that you said that when you were in, Germany, Croatia, those areas growing up, you didn't notice gender as much. But you said you moved to Canada, and it's only kind of been here where you've kind of had this bit of a different
Mhm.
struggle. Is that you did mention that earlier, right?
Yes, like, I think, at least in the context I lived in, there was more gender neutrality. I think when I came to Canada, it was all ladies and men, and in the workplace, it was constantly, hey, ladies. And I was just like, no, please leave me alone with this term. Like,
Mm,
there were so much gender terms. And I spoke with a trans woman who is born in Canada, and she also said the English language needs to have everything gendered. And, like, for example, in German language, we have three genders, or three articles. It's like male, female, and neutral. And I think the neutral one was always the one that I resonated with. But, like, in English, you don't have that. And so
yeah.
here it was so much kind of imposed onto gender kind of things that I needed to find the correct label, because it was really painful in my body to receive emails with "dear ladies," and I was just like, no, please, no, don't use this term for me. Like, I really noticed that this doesn't resonate at all.
Yeah, and like I consider, I know from people that I have in my life and people that I've spoken to, especially on this podcast, that being misgendered is a very painful experience for you as well. So maybe talk a little bit about like your relationship with that part of it, because I could imagine that it would still happen day to day because people make their assumptions from just looking at you, and they would of course do that it would happen on a constant basis, correct?
Yes, it is on a constant basis. Um, I have learned to accept that in the end, most people project onto me that I'm a woman. Like, if I'm on the street, I'm passing. There's a part of me that feels hurt by it. There's a part of me that feels angry about it.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's really like there is always a pain in it. And I think it depends. For me, that the pain depends on how honest the other side is. Like, for example, I attended a new supervision group. And, like, I would have loved if they just said, we have no idea about gender diversity, because then at least I know where they're at. But then everybody pretended, oh, we are so inclusive. But, like, in the end, I can, after 10 sentences, I know how inclusive they are and that they don't know.
Of
So,
course.
and I think then it became really complicated, because, like, on one hand, they said things that told me they have no idea around non-binary culture. And then when they talked about me, they all used the wrong pronouns. And then honestly, I got like at this stage, I got really angry, and I said to them, hey, if you don't want to deal with these kind of things, leave me alone.
Yeah.
And I set these boundaries, and nobody knew how to respond to my boundary. But like, I think this was like, if there are many people and there is no honesty around it. Like, I prefer transphobic people to people who pretend they're inclusive and don't know how to be inclusive. So
Because
this is a bit like,
at
I
least
think
they're
my
like
pain is that.
saying it, at least it's in front of your face instead of this like discussion behind your back. Or how do we deal with Natalie? Or what do we do with Natalie? You know what I mean? It feels a little bit like, yeah, like I can understand that.
Yeah. And so, yeah, like I think there is the pain of it. I've learned to accept it, and I learned to really discern what is within my control and what's not. And this is completely out of my control. And really also validating myself, validating my gender identity by myself. And like, even though nobody sees it, I'm not crazy. I am who I am. Like, and I noticed the difference. I think COVID, when we suddenly got all disconnected, COVID was a huge relief for me because I could just be my gender, and I didn't need to be in cis spaces, and I didn't need to hang out with that. And so there was a part of me which really enjoyed that. And then afterwards, I needed to relearn, like, okay, how do I now set my boundaries?
How do I set my boundaries in those cis spaces, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
And that is work in progress. I don't have like, I experiment, I play with it, and I'm sometimes frustrated with it. It's work in progress.
And I think that's the important thing for people who are listening out there to understand is that Natalie is a coach, a trauma recovery coach on her own journey of, you know, gender and like how she handles it and setting boundaries, knowing that this is going to be like this for probably every single person as well. No, regardless of your gender, on your journey of life and acceptance, you are going to have to continue to be a work in progress. You're never going to get to a place of I'm perfectly here. I'm a perfect non-binary person. I'm a perfect gay person. I'm a perfect trans person, right? It's all a work in progress, and you have to continue to go through because we're navigating life in a world that's not necessarily been built for people like us
Yes.
specifically.
Yes, and the one thing, honestly, like, because sometimes I get these comments, oh, just stay in the non-binary community. And I'm like, no, I want to belong to the world. Like, I love my community, and it feels a bit like a refuge, like a safe place to be in. But then also, like, just based on my work and who I am, I need to be in mainstream society. I cannot just be in one community. So how can I balance that? And how can I be with that?
Totally. I mean, it would be amazing if they had a place in the world that was just filled with, you know, queer people who knew everything about every single part of being the different spectrums of being queer, and we could all live there and we don't have to deal with the rest of the world. But that's just not reality, right? We have to, in our day-to-day lives, move around and coordinate and communicate with people from all different kinds of backgrounds culturally, right? So it's not something that anyone can just say go hang out with your people and you'll be fine, because if we could, maybe we would.
There's a risk that it might happen.
And so I'd love to hear a bit about you. You mentioned that, you know, of course you're a trauma recovery coach and you've obviously been dealing with trauma. And you said that a part of your own journey of gender was going, did some of the trauma like, you know, attribute to your thoughts and feelings on that. I'd love to unpack a bit more about that so that like the listeners out there, maybe who have gone through something similar can understand this. So can you maybe elaborate a bit further on that part of the journey for our listeners?
Yes, like my own recovery journey is trauma due to childhood abuse, and the other element was systemic trauma in a way that when I moved to Canada, there were so many difficult experiences that I just shut down. And so so I think on one hand, I had already done a lot of healing. So to work with my own systemic trauma, it was useful that I knew how to heal and that I knew what to do to recover. And so I know that I had a benefit in this context. For me, trauma recovery means a lot I did a lot of parts work. I really love working with my different parts. And I also think for my gender identity is useful parts work to really validate the experience, because in the end, if I focus inside, I have the power and the control to create my own happiness.
Yeah.
I also use EMDR and a lot of somatic approaches. And so in the end, in my work as a trauma recovery coach, I kind of use all what was helpful for me. And of course, there's a lot of different training around it, but what worked for me, I use it to give it to my clients because I really believe in it. Like, for
Yeah.
example, when I worked with my systemic trauma, I really learned about polyvagal theory, which is how our nervous system responds to the environment, to our relationships, and to the cues within ourselves.
Yeah.
And it really had made me aware how much I was feeling unsafe in cis spaces and how much I had been influenced by the past experiences. But I also learned, okay, it is a response from my nervous system. So how can I navigate it, and how can I really learn to discern what are safer spaces and what are really not safe spaces?
Yeah.
And so this really, all this understanding helped me to empower myself in the situations I was in. And so I think it is a journey. I think systemic trauma to some degree challenged me to also see the subtleties in the present, because with childhood trauma, it is easier because it was finished. Systemic dynamics, like, yes, I can take care of myself, but I also don't necessarily know what might happen in the future, if it makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can't plan for the future. You can only, like I said, go through the healing of where you're at right now and
Yeah,
keep going through
yeah,
that journey to cleanse your nervous system of all of the, I guess, energy that's been stored in in the nervous system that from, I guess, from
yeah,
those traumatic experiences.
yeah.
And so then how did that go with defining your gender? Because you said it played a part with it. Was it
The
through the
childhood
healing?
abuse, yes, like the healing, like childhood abuse for me was sexual abuse, physical abuse, and emotional abuse.
Mm,
And so healing the sexual abuse was very useful to really align with my gender, because I also think there are still certain stereotypes that you are only queer or gender diverse or not fitting in because you're not healed enough. So
yes.
really sitting down with myself and having the empowerment in myself to say, no, I don't believe these kind of theories out there. I think they're
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
toxic.
Totally
But
toxic.
like, yeah, but like, it's just like in the beginning, like I was a person, like I was used to a fawn response, so I didn't have my own boundaries. So my own healing for childhood abuse really allowed me then to set my own boundaries and let go of certain ideas that I didn't believe in. But it was also this kind, like in the past, I used to put others on the pedestal and I used me in here. So really all these inner changes helped me to fully embrace my gender and also to put it out there and to be happy with it.
To be happy with it is the most important part, right? And again, as you said before, that's a continual work in progress to continue to be happy with yourself
Yes.
in the world, right?
It's also the question, who do I love more, other people or myself? Like this is something I learned even with my family. I don't have contact with my family of origin just because I never changed their toxic behaviors. But like, I think saying no to that was a step of empowerment to choose myself and my well-being. And the same now, if I run into people who are not curious about my gender and don't want to have these conversations, well, I'm also say no, because why should I hang out with them?
Correct. And I know that we've talked that you have a interesting relationship with people who are, I guess, cisgendered, who obviously don't try to put any effort into trying to understand you and getting to know
Yes,
you.
but also themselves.
Mm,
Like for me, it's like I learn from people who are different from me,
correct.
because if I only speak to people who are like me, how can I explore myself? So I sometimes, like if I go into trainings and I notice people are unaware, I usually say to them, hey, if you want to hang out and have 1 hour conversation outside of the training to learn more about gender, let me know. And usually none of them responds. And I find it so sad, because I think cis people can learn a lot from trans folks because they have a gender experience that is usually far more aware. And because like also for me, when people could project onto me that I'm a woman, my experience of life was different than if I put out there, no, I'm non-binary and this is who I am. Like, so this change in experience and this change how society sees us, it's also a learning opportunity for everyone.
Definitely. Yeah. A massive learning opportunity for all of us. Yeah. In a world where every journey is unique, one path shines brightly for the queer community. Introducing QueerQuest, the first of its kind personal development platform designed exclusively for us, by us. At QueerQuest, we understand the multifaceted journey of queer identity. That's why we've created a space where you can explore, learn, and grow with the guidance of queer experts from around the globe. Whether you're seeking to enhance your physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual well-being, QueerQuest is your gateway to transformation. Imagine embarking on quests tailored to your journey of self-discovery, finding community, and unlocking your queer excellence. QueerQuest offers online courses, coaching programs, and soon workshops, seminars, retreats, and festivals, all designed to empower you to live your best life. Ready to start your adventure? Join us at www.queerquest.vip to become part of a movement towards personal and collective greatness. Sign up today to join the waitlist and be the first to know when we launch. QueerQuest, where your journey of self-discovery and transformation begins. Don't just dream of a life filled with pride and purpose, make it your reality with QueerQuest. Visit www.queerquest.vip now. Your quest awaits.
And so I find it sad that people don't use this opportunity and that they aren't curious and that they also don't use it as an opportunity to learn about themselves. Because usually I think when I speak to non-binary folks or trans folks, there's more awareness around gender than if I talk to cis folks because they don't know it. And so one of my friends, and she is cis, so she, like I ask a question and then she's like, I've never thought about it. I need to think about it. I really don't have an answer. And many people I ask, I think like the only thing that they can say, they identify as a cis woman because in the end of the sexual organs, and then I come away, but how does this relate?
Yeah, exactly. They literally define their life by what was granted to them in their body, right?
Yes, and so yeah. So I think there's a part of me which would love that people get more curious and just have these conversations. And also, I think like in all those small little things, whether it's going to buy clothes or whether like how has it shaped us? Because I'm also aware like certain things that society says is attributed to women, like they don't do tech jobs or these kind of things. Like my first degree is I'm a master's in industrial engineering, and I've always worked in male-dominated environments, and I feel really good there because I think it's more aligned with who I am.
Yeah.
But I never felt the pressure that I needed to be in a certain, like this female kind of thing, if this makes sense. And I think we can dismantle stereotypes better if we have these conversations.
Definitely makes it better if you have those conversations because, but as you said, a lot of people aren't open to them. And that could be out of fear, out of, am I going to say the wrong thing? Or just a lot of times people just are so caught up in their own bubble that they don't truly care to even want to know what's outside of their bubble, right?
I agree. Like, yeah, I would hope our verse becomes more curious and also more open. Also themselves, like in the end, they don't need to be like me, but just be curious about you. If something doesn't resonate, it tells you it's not you.
Yeah. So we've talked about the gender kind of spectrum. I'd love to also hear a bit about your like how that affects you when it comes to, I guess, your sexuality or your dating and things like that. So I would love to hear a bit about that because I also noted that you mentioned that you're demisexual. So I'd love to hear a bit about that spectrum as well and how the two play a big part in that.
I don't date. This is the first thing. Okay. If I look at my life and if I look at the partners I had, like I only have attraction if I know a person. And I really need to know them for a long time before I feel any type of attraction. And it's really complicated because I can't control it. I just hang out with people and suddenly something shifts and then suddenly I'm attracted, but only if I know them. And before this, like the person, there's no attraction to them. I would say, but this is so because like, okay, over the last years, I haven't dated. I also haven't looked for a relationship. I kind of let that go for a moment. So it's hard to say how it would be now, but in the end, I wasn't like my partners were male identified, but I also mainly because I only hung out in male dominated environments, like it was workplace. I can be attracted to women. Like I know this with female friends. However, I was always in a relationship, so I didn't explore these kind of things. So I think in a way, my demisexual identity is really strong. It doesn't really matter what is on the inside. Like, for example, if one of my partners would have come out as trans, I would never leave them because honestly, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care. So gender-wise, I would say it's pretty open, but the problem is I don't know what to look for because if I don't know the person, I'm not attracted to them.
I see. So they have to be, of course, a friend and probably a good friend for you to start to assess, hey, am I feeling like a friendship towards them, or is there, like you said,
It's a more, yeah. And it often is like a split second where I was, oh shit, like, and it's like, I always feel shocked if it happens. But like, it's really something that shifts and I know them for a long time.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think then it doesn't matter anymore.
It doesn't matter anymore, of course.
No.
And do you find from, like I said, of course, you know other people and you help people who are, non-binary. Do you find that this is a common way that they would define, their attraction, that they're
I
demisexual,
don't,
or like I said, I just want to also give some information or like learnings to people out there who may be going, oh, wonder about non-binary and a relationship as well.
I don't know. I think I've met all different attractions types.
Gotcha.
I'm not like, I know some demisexual people who are cis, and I know some non-binary people who are, I never know what the opposite is to demisexual. I hate normal sexual beings. There's missing a word.
I know exactly what you're saying. I'm trying my best to not mispronounce the right the right term as well. But I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes. So I think people who are attracted, standard attraction.
So basically, let's explain for anyone out there who maybe have never heard of demisexual. So demisexual is someone who is attracted to people based on their personality and getting to know the person. So it's like an attraction on to a person and their personality and things like that outside of their gender. But also it can still be.
It doesn't need to be. I think, okay, this is my experience of demisexual. I don't know whether demisexual needs to be outside of gender.
Correct.
Like this could only be mine.
Yes.
But demisexual, the theme is attraction builds over time. So it's not like I go out and I see somebody and I'm attracted to them, like this a stranger.
Not attracted on their physical appearances, is more on getting to know them as a person.
Yes. It takes over time. It takes some time to be attracted. It's usually, at least the stories I've heard of my own, it's more confusing. It's not as clear. And so dating, I think, is normally a bit more confusing or complicated because it takes time and you don't know who you're attracted to. Like if I look at my past partners, they were absolute opposite ends of human beings. So very different. So there is no pattern.
No pattern, yeah. And that you've nailed it there. It doesn't have to be on the gender spectrum. It's just based on personality. So being a gay person, I could be demisexual, but that would mean that I would still be attracted to men, but I would be more attracted to men on their personality than on their physical attributions. And that would go.
Yes, and you would need longer time probably to be attracted to them.
And as you said, it could be a switch where one day you would just realize, oh, okay, I am feeling attracted to them as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And like just by the stories I've heard from people who identify as demisexual, it's usually attraction is a bit more confusing and who we are attracted to is more confusing. I'm not sure whether maybe some of them are clearly attracted to another gender. Like this is where I'm not sure what is my non-binary identity and what is demisexuality.
Totally.
Like for me, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I get it. And so I guess when it comes down to it, you could be in a relationship with someone from any kind of gender. That wouldn't matter to you, specifically to you as
No,
a
like for me, it doesn't matter.
very interesting. Yeah. And as you said, it can also be very confusing as well for you because, yeah, like you said, if it comes on like that, sometimes you know, it can be a very difficult way for you to possibly find a deeper connection, have the relationship that maybe you're
Yes.
looking for.
Yes, like I think dating doesn't work for me because of that, because I would need somebody who at least has the patience to build friendships that I can find out whether I'm attracted to them. And I can't say to them I'm attracted after 3 dates because this has never happened to me in my lifetime.
It takes quite some time for you. So yeah, I can understand how it might be hard. Well, it would be hard for you to find a relationship, which is maybe why at the moment it's not the priority, because it's hard to be a priority for something when you don't know when it's going to come on, right?
I agree. Like I think my non-binary part isn't very hopeful, and my demisexual part doesn't make it easier. So we rather let it go and just say, okay, maybe somebody comes into my life. Like honestly, I rather think it will be a natural way getting to know people without having an intention to date. This doesn't work for me.
Yeah. See, everyone out here, where everything in life is confusing as well, and we're all just a work in progress trying to figure it out, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I'd love to talk a little bit about the work that you do, because I love, you know, trauma recovery. Like I've done it
Mhm.
myself, I do it for my clients as well. Talk a bit about, excuse me, the kinds of people that would normally come to you and the kind of work that you do. We mentioned a bit about kind of some of the things that you do, but let's highlight it a bit more so that anyone out there who might be struggling, and again, you mentioned as well that a lot of, you know, you help anyone out there, but of course
Mhm.
knowing your journey, you know, usually we're attracted in a sense to people who can help us, who've been through things that we've been through. So you probably are more likely to get clients who might be on the spectrum and when it comes to their gender as well, like, or you maybe share a
Yeah.
bit about that as well.
Yes. Okay. First of all, I work mainly with people who have experienced childhood abuse, and I also, or people who have experienced systemic trauma, and sometimes it's a connection of both.
Yeah.
Um, I think most of my clients from the queer community, I work a lot compared to mainstream counselors. I work a lot with gender diverse people, whether they are trans men, trans women, or non-binary people, or somewhere else on that, just because I think I can support them in a different way when it comes to the relationship between oneself and society. And I think there's usually a journey of awakening, like after, like coming out is beautiful, but then suddenly our relationships shift and society responds very weirdly. And so then I think in this thing, I just can offer something that maybe like mainstream coaches cannot offer when it comes to trauma recovery. And also the step which is important for me is really how can we find the place from empowerment, and how can we sometimes make the decision, when do I need to self-preserve and when do I need to stand up, and how do I take care of myself and all of that. Like I don't know, like in the US, with the current rising anti-trans movement, yes, it affects
Yeah.
me and it affects my clients. And the same, like there is a shift in Canada. There's more hatred against trans people. So how do we empower ourselves in all of that? And how do we find our way to respond in that? And so this is a bit like, I think, where I can offer a benefit to the clients who are gender diverse and also to those who are queer, because first of all, I'm part of the queer community here. I do my volunteering work here, but then also I have a better understanding of the issues compared to mainstream coaches.
That makes
This makes
total
it.
sense, and I think that's why it's important for us as we go through our healing journey. So many people in this community have obviously had to go through a healing journey and are continuing to do that because it's a work in progress. But the fact that we can now use what we've learned and been through to support others, and like I
Mhm.
said, a relatable understanding of how to navigate life in the world around us when we are on a different spectrum when it comes to gender or sexuality as well, right?
Yes, and honestly, like I integrate anti-oppressive practices in the work I'm doing because honestly, I think that's the only way how we can do it healthily. So I adjust models I'm learning into anti-oppressive practices because I think sometimes the mainstream models are really toxic for queer folks. And so it's really like how when I learn something new, how can I adjust it to make it working for the context and healthy for the context I'm in? And so this is a bit around where I do work around the models I'm using, decolonization, anti-oppressive practice, so that they become healthier.
A lot healthier, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to touch on just as well, because I know you mentioned earlier, you said systemic trauma.
Mhm.
Now, I'd love just so that anyone listening can understand that. Of course, systemic trauma can come from a number of different areas, like culturally, for on your gender, and I know that you moved to Canada and you could be classed as what, an immigrant as well. So I'd love for you to talk a bit more about that systemic trauma, because not everyone also completely understands it. So it'd be great to highlight that part as well in that part of your
Uh,
journey.
okay. First of all, I need to say, like, trauma in itself is an experience that overwhelms our capacity to cope with it emotionally.
Yeah.
And it may also be something that is a threat to our life, to our belonging, and to our family. And so the threat can be objective or subjective. So, like, first of all, I was a bit unprepared when I came here, and I didn't come here as a permanent resident. I was a temporary resident. And so when I came here, I suddenly noticed all the systemic barriers and the things that I couldn't access just because of my legal status. And then I also had experiences. My first landlord got violent with me just because I wasn't a permanent resident. And then in all of that, I'm not sure whether it was a good idea. I started using the label non-binary, and I had Canadian friends here, and as soon as I started using this label, and even though they were aware I was different, they all disappeared. And so I suddenly I lost all of my friends except one person. I wasn't able to find a job because of my legal status, and then I wasn't in a college, and so it was really toxic for my gender identity because I wasn't existent in this environment. So
Yeah.
it was really complicated. So for me, systemic trauma is just the levels are more complicated and it's more difficult to escape. Like if I would have had a family outside of Canada, I probably would have left, but
Yeah.
I didn't. Like I had either I go into a new country or I stay in and try to work through it.
Yeah.
And so I think, and I know experiences are differences, but like systemic racism and the constant microaggression, all of these kind of things can lead to systemic trauma within us.
Yeah.
I would say in my like a lot of the approach and treatment often lead to victim blaming. And I don't find that okay because none of us is responsible for how society treats us. But in the end, the only empowerment have is ourselves and how we navigate that and how we deal with it. And so it's a bit about how can I work with that so that I don't internalize it and that I'm don't think I'm crazy, because the dynamics are crazy making. And like the person who stood by my side, she is a Black woman. And so we both kind of supported each other to not get crazy. And like I labeled for her what wasn't okay, and she labeled for me what wasn't okay. And it was really helpful. And I think sometimes we just need this kind of spaces. Oh, we are actually healthy. It's just like the environment is necessarily healthy we are in. Like I think for queer folks, it's often workplaces that aren't necessarily healthy, where some of our identities are left outside or are not allowed to exist, or also like dynamics if suddenly policies changes or if suddenly countries go backwards when it comes to queer rights. Like this can also contribute to systemic trauma.
Definitely. And I wanted just to touch on that because I want so many people in our community, we are dealing with systemic trauma. Like I
Yes.
said, the
Yeah.
world and society in almost every country hasn't been built for people like us.
Yes.
Whether you are, like I said, whether that's, you're in the queer community, whether that's your sexuality or your gender, it has been built for us to succeed and to win. And so we all, on some level, will deal with systemic trauma, some more than others. And there are so many more layers. Again, it can be to do with your race and other cultural differences, like religion and all those things, right? So it can really layer it on to the point where like you can do the best you can, but you can't avoid the fact that the trauma is still happening to you on a regular basis.
Yes, and like this is, I think, where it gets so complicated, really, what we choose. Like I learned in my own journey, I learned to self-preserve. Like I'm quite an outspoken person, but I also learned the limits of my outspokenness because I really got burned out with that. And so really then to learn, okay, sometimes it's okay to avoid. Sometimes it's okay to take a break. And all of these kind of things. And I think it is really learning to listen to ourselves and where we are at and what we would need in the moment so that we can move forward with that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Yeah. Knowing our limits, knowing our boundaries and how we can safely enforce that, or what changes we need to make in our life so that we feel that we are more safe in who we are and how we live our life, you know? Yeah. Beautiful. Well, Natalie, before we go, I know that there's going to be someone out there listening who's, who might be going through a similar journey to you or has been through it or is at the beginning of their journey. What advice would you give to maybe younger Natalie or someone else in our community who's maybe early on in their journey to where you are now? What would be something you would love to leave that person with right now?
One thing I think, I say it now, it's really worth it. It's worth it to go through the journey and also take care of yourself in the journey. I think after coming out, while it is a beautiful step, it may really change many of the relationships you're suddenly noticing. And it may really also, those parts that believe in a fair world suddenly may see a different world, and really allow yourself to work through the process, through your emotions and through the grief, because there is something at the other side that is good.
I love that. And because, it's true. It is worth it and it does get better. And you will get to a place of, like I said, you'll be a work in progress, but each step means that you're on the journey of a happier life for yourself. And you should be living life for you, not for anyone else around you. And if we've all everyone out there can probably relate to a time where you've shared who you are and then people leave. Take that as a gift, because if these people don't want to know you for who you are, then they're not people that you should be wanting to spend your time with, because there are so many more people out there in our community and people outside of our community as well that will love you for who you are. It's just about finding your tribe and finding your, like they said, the people that are going to be there, and can relate to you as well. So don't take that as, it is hard in the moment for sure, but try not to take that as a negative part of who you are. It's more about them than it is about really you.
You need to shed all of those that don't fit to finally find those that fit.
Exactly. Beautiful. Well, Natalie, I want to thank you so much for showing up today and sharing your journey. I think it's going to be something super valuable for the listeners out there to hear and to relate to. And I'm sure there's so much more that we could pack on. But I'd love it if, you could share a bit about, is there anything coming up that you want to talk about, or how could people find you if they do want to get to understand maybe a little bit more about you, or maybe even possibly work with you as well?
Sure. Well, first of all, they can check out my website, which is brighthorizontherapies.com. And the other thing is I have a podcast, which is called Trauma Demystified, where I talk about trauma. And also, I started off with explaining a lot about trauma, but it will get far more into healing over the next episode. So if they want to check that out for their own healing journey, it would be great.
Beautiful. And I'll get those off you so that we can link them below, so that if someone wants to find it, you can find it below. All right, Natalie, again, thank you for coming on today. It's been a pleasure. Everyone, I trust has been a valuable conversation. If you've got any questions or you want to share something, you know how to find me on social media. Anyway, to share your story. I love hearing from you all. And just know I'm going to be back with another episode of the Queer Quest podcast very soon. But until then, always remember that you've got this and I've got you. Bye for now. Are you ready to embark on a transformative journey towards love and happiness? Introducing the 21-day Gay Men's Guide to Love and Happiness. This isn't just a course, it's a pathway to discovering your true self, overcoming challenges, and embracing happiness. Join hundreds of gay men who found joy and freedom. Learn from Cristiano Green, a coach with 20 years experience and a journey like yours. For a limited time, get this life-changing course at 75% off with a 100% risk-free guarantee. There's nothing to lose, but so much to gain. Your new life is just a click away. Enroll in the 21-day Gay Men's Guide to Love and Happiness today. Visit theglobalpridecollective.com and start your journey towards a happier, more fulfilled you.